I've got with me today Gordon Richardson, who's a very old friend of mine. He's been in the tea trade even longer than me. And we're going to be in conversation. I want to hear a little bit about Gordon's life in the tea trade, and we'll follow up with perhaps a few anecdotes and the like. So Gordon, I first saw you when I started as a young trainee, and I was sitting at the back of the auction room in Plantation House taking down prices, and you were this dashing young man in the auctioneer's box bidding furiously. So take it from there.
Thank you, Mike. I started, let's start in the beginning. I started in 1954 in the tea trade, and the only reason I came into the tea trade was that they wanted a tall boy. My father worked in the city, and he came home, and I was one of 4 children, the oldest, so Gordon was dispatched off to, as you well know, the firm I worked for, Gow, Wilson and Stanton. And I started there doing all the odd jobs, tea boy upwards, and gradually worked my way up through the company, and that's my history there. From which I then went on to join my father's firm in the 1970s. And gradually my father retired, and from which I eventually took the business over. So that's the brief story of me.
Yes.
Now, what else would you like to
Well,
really
we
know?
can then go into a little bit more detail. If we go back first of all to your time with Gow, Wilson and Stanton, Gow, Wilson and Stanton, there were some incredible characters in the tea trade in those days, as we all know.
Quite.
And I suppose perhaps now we've inherited that, I don't know. But anyway, there were. And of course, bearing in mind, this was not long after the war. So, the city was a very different place, obviously, to what it is now. But
Totally.
you had some interesting folk in your company, didn't you? Is there anybody you'd like to tell us about?
Oh, my immediate boss, the inevitable Mr. Lamb. When he got rather enraged, the language was not very good. Ladies, leave the room.
Yes.
And he could get very cross. I will tell one story about him once. He was having a go at me. The phone rang, and it was Unilever. And they wanted something immediately. So I was dispatched, and he just put his hand in his pocket, gave me all his money, said, just get in a cab, boy, and get there. All the bad temper had gone, and when I got back, I got asked why I'd been so long. I'd walked back, I thought, I don't want to go back and have another blasting from him. And he said, we've done it. We've sold 2,000 chests of tea to a Papa Keys. I never knew where a Papa Keys are. I believe they're the port for Lagos.
Of course,
Those
yes.
sort of things happened.
There was a big trade,
Yes,
wasn't
there was some good characters there. There was the senior director called Mr. Mest, and unfortunately he died of a heart attack. He was good. He was good fun. He was good fun. Very fair man, but very strict. But I have a lot to thank them all for what I have learnt.
I'm sure, Gordon, yes. And of course, they also, whether it was the luck or the foresight, actually owned their own building in Rood Lane.
Yes, they...
and so they sold it, I think, probably made more money out of that than they'd ever made out of tea.
So I was told by the senior members of staff, if one may put it like it used to talk about senior members of staff, they made so much money out of the rubber boom, they bought the building, and they had the building built. And it was eventually signed to Kleinbolt Benson when the building and the business was reorganised and sold. And that was that. They owned the building.
And then Gow Wilson went in with, first of all, George White.
That's
and
right.
then Sanderson, so it became
No,
George White.
Sanderson and George White. Then we follow Sanderson into George White.
Yes, right, and eventually ended up as Gow White only,
Yeah.
with I think how many broking firms by then? There must have been 4 at least, I would think.
Correct. And then it was eventually, what was left of it was merged into Easter Thompson and Ewan.
Who actually ended up with virtually every tea broking firm apart from Wilson Smith.
Smithit, yes.
Always amused us that we managed to keep independent.
Yeah.
How we did it, I do not know.
No, but the place was full of characters.
Of course it was. Of course it was.
And in some ways, as I've said about this infamous Mr. Lamb, a lot of them were like it. They were very bristly, but actually, if chips were down and you went and saw them and said, look, I've got a problem, they'd say, leave it with me, and a phone would ring in a quarter of an hour later. It's settled. Just forget it.
I think actually the partners had great respect for their senior market men. I mean, I know in our company we had old Bill Turner, who we joked about, but he was a very solid man. He stood up for everybody, but he was highly respected by the partners.
Yeah.
And the same, I know, in TC&I, and a number of them all had some highly respected men, which was, apart from the partnership, which I think was very, very good. I'll just tell you one little story. You may have been in the auction room at the time. William James and Henry Thompson. Willie Thompson always insisted on selling the Salon catalogue on a Tuesday.
Correct.
And nobody else got a look in. On this particular day, he was going to a very important lunch at the Guildhall. And there wasn't time to change. So he came in his full regalia. He entered the box in full morning dress, plus a lovely carnation buttonhole. And one of the buyers stood up and said, "You didn't need to dress for us, sir." Well, I thought, you get all these little quips, which are always...
Yes. I mean, that reminds me of the Mr. Lamb I was talking about. You always used to have suits that were heavily checked.
That's right.
And they'd all whisper round the room, "What's for the 2:30, Willie, Lamb, Willie?"
Yes.
Tease him unmercifully.
I know.
See if they could get get him going. Yeah.
I think, I mean, we could go on for that particular one forever. Now, one other thing, when Brian did his interviews here, we've talked a bit about the warehousing, because obviously us young guys in tea brokers obviously got involved with the warehousing quite a lot. Any stories there, Gordon, that might be of interest?
Yes, I used to be sent round to Wapping to look at the teas, inspect them, and yes, that was an experience.
Yes.
An experience on its own, another world.
It was indeed.
The amusing thing is that if there was ever any problems, you could never find any staff, and then you knew there was a problem. If they were all there, things were sweet. Other than that, you knew there was a problem, so then you had to go and hunt them out.
Yeah.
And of course, a couple of times they were on strike, and I got told, "Don't go and argue with them, they're likely to do something to you."
Right. Yes, they're pretty physical, all of those guys, as they had to be, of course, didn't they? They really did. But I mean, when you think that, I mean, a number of things attracted me to the tea trade when I was taken on for my year's training with Wilson Smithit. But the things that I loved about it was, one, I loved tea, which helped, of course, and it turned out they had a palate, which was rather helpful. I loved people, and I was fascinated with the opportunity, thinking that I would be able to travel abroad and see these places. And I was very lucky that all happened. But what I was going to say about that was that the warehouses were always fascinating. But when you think that in 1959, and it was even more when you started for 5 years earlier, we were handling 60 to 80,000 chests of tea physically each week through the auction.
Oh, yes.
Well, the involvement of the number of people in that, from the warehouses, the broking staff, and everything else, I mean, is absolutely phenomenal.
It was an industry.
It was an incredible industry.
And in the end, it just dwindled to nothing. 3 or 4 firms.
No, yes.
Yes, that's what it's come down to. And
I mean, but you see, in those days, we were the centre of the tea world, because obviously we owned most of the plantations in India and Sri Lanka. We were the biggest consuming country in the world, and of course it was a massive re-export trade.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of tea that was sold in London auction that was re-exported to the States, to Ireland, to the continent was phenomenal. But again, one knew it was all going to have to change.
Yeah, well,
and indeed it did.
That's exactly what Woodham's did, or came about. The original founder of Woodham's, I have good reason to believe that he was of Jewish extraction, and he came to this country about 1880, and all I can presume is, from what I can gather, he was expelled, refugee.
Yes, well, so many of them, and
And
many
they
of them
came
made
like
good,
a lot
didn't
of the other ones,
Yes.
and that enabled re-export, because the people on the continent wanted the tea,
they? Yes,
and
yes,
that was, they had to come to London to
yeah,
get it.
absolutely.
But I will say one thing, Mike, we have seen a fundamental change in the way tea is packed, if I may say
Yes.
so. It's gone from wooden chests to now it's gone all through the stages to paper bags and tunny sacks. And I remember being told when I first came into it, one of these days, lad, they'll blow it into a tin box and suck it out at the other end. We're not far from it.
Not
I
far
think.
from it, indeed.
No, that was very foresighted.
interesting.
The man was got a lot of foresight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One little interesting aside on that, how things can change dramatically. The chief executive of the International Tea Committee, Manuja Pires, has just come back from a trip to Japan and Indonesia, and the tea consumption is declining in both those countries, but the thing that is increasing dramatically is ready to drink.
Oh,
The
yeah.
ready to drink market is massive.
Yes.
Now, God forbid if that ever happens here, and I'd like to think it never will, but you never know. I mean, I'm not saying you can't get it here, you can, but I hope it doesn't. But, you just wonder where it's all going to go, don't you?
Yes. Well, I mean, we had people come to see us about this from Japan, and we couldn't believe that literally it was put a dime in the machine and get like a can, not
right.
of Coke, but of tea.
Of tea.
But I mean, it's a huge business.
Well, it is, and it competes. I mean, because Coca-Cola has always been, in many ways, one of our biggest competitors.
Yeah.
In many, so in a way, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I think we're
The use of tea will go down.
Inevitably, as it does. I mean, look at America, the southern states there. I mean, iced tea is everywhere, but the amount of tea used is minimal, isn't it? It's probably 0.1% or something. But there we are, that's life. But let us go back now, Gordon. Tell us a little bit more about Woodham's now. When did your father take over the business?
My father inherited the business, really, or was given the business from Mr. Woodham's. There was a Mr. Woodham's.
Yes, that's right.
He was a bachelor, and he had no relations apart from his sister. Well, obviously she didn't want it. So my father, dear old Henry, it was given to him. So he got that early 1930s, and he had it from there. And then when the war came, because most of his business, about over 90%, was re-export,
Yeah.
he was without a job. There was one particular account he had, which was taken over by the Ministry of Food,
Of course.
of
yes.
which they gave him £14 a quarter. His allocation. He always used to go on about his allocation. So he, after a bit, by 1941, he thought, well, we've got to do something about this. I think the reason he went and volunteered and went into the RAF was he didn't want to be conscripted and go to steelworks or down a coal mine. I know it's an awful thing to say, but
No, I mean, I can understand.
and
totally.
the business closed from then until until it came off ration in 51.
Yeah.
He did work for somebody who used to export things to the near continent, particularly Switzerland, for a couple of years before that. But no, that's that. But then he came back, and then he got busy again and rebuilt all the connections that he had. And
Was he able to re-engage with old customers, or did he have to literally start from scratch? He did. Oh,
most of them, yes.
Well, presumably he had a good reputation.
Oh yes.
Well, I know he did.
Yes, well, number of people came back. Well, it was a question of getting them up and getting them going,
Absolutely. No, quite right.
and getting round, dare one say, the restrictions that were in place because of wartime.
Yes.
They eventually faded, but that's what went. And
It was
then,
a difficult time.
Then eventually, as you've seen, like me, the thing completely changed. As you mentioned, the re-export went because the tea didn't come here. People bought direct, which is what you learn at business school. Woodham's had to change tack a bit. So we became more of a stockist of teas, specialist teas for the UK market. which is the basis of their business today.
Which, of course, is, I mean, the timing's good because there's no doubt about it. There's a reawakening, or not a reawakening, but the younger generation are very keen looking at teas, speciality teas.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I know with my involvement with the Great Taste Awards, which I've been doing now for 25 years, doing the judging, the amount of tea every year increases and the variety of teas increase as well. So there's a definite hunger for exciting teas, which you guys produce.
Hopefully, if you can keep up with it.
Mike,
you've struck the nail on the head. It's galloping up forward at a pace that, in a way, it's the supply.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the way it runs.
No, I know it's a worry. I mean, Sri Lanka, which of course, as you know, I was involved in many ways. Somebody was saying to me the other day, the trouble is these guys now with the problems in Sri Lanka, they're not interested in mucking around producing the finest teas as they used to, which was what their reputation was. They're rather cutting corners now and reducing their costs. And
well, yes.
What do you end up with? You end up with nothing very special if you're not careful.
Mediocre.
Which is no good at all. No.
But the trouble is, you come back to the consumer wants a lower price.
I know.
So it reflects back down the chain. I think what we've got to try and do is to say, yes, they've got to pay a bit more money.
Absolutely.
But you're going to scream if you dare suggest it.
Well, I mean, there's two different markets now. We've still got the same problem in the supermarkets today, that all the main packers, the ones we know so well, PG, Tetley's, and dare I say Taylor's, who are probably the most successful, I think, of them all. I'm a great Taylor's fan. But PG tips are selling in the supermarkets now vast packets of tea for next to nothing.
Yes.
I mean, it's a desperation to get rid of the stuff almost, which is so sad. But I suppose, an organisation, and when you think PG Tips was the market leader for years and years and years, it claimed over 30% of the market for a long, long time. And when Unilever sold it, they were down, well below 30, down in the high 20s. And Taylor's were up over 30. So,
yes.
And there's a lovely family who still believe in the basics of quality.
Yeah.
And you pay a bit more for it. And luckily there are enough people who are prepared to do that, obviously.
Well,
but even they have to watch out because with all this cost cutting going on from all the other guys. But on the other hand, of course, you look at a supermarket shelf and you see some interesting teas now. I'm talking about teas now, not the tisanes and all those things. So there's no doubt about it. There is interest there, and I admire you, Gordon, for doing what you do because I think it's lovely.
People will always want something different.
Yeah.
You're wearing a tie. I'm not wearing a tie.
You're relaxed today.
A vast difference, but that's what I'm getting at. There's people do want to be different.
No, of course. Yes.
The other firm that I would mention, there's a tin behind me called Ringtons, and they are again another family firm, and they are doing exactly the things as Taylor's. They're not known so well in the south, but they do very, very well.
They do, and of course they produce the teas for a lot of the top supermarket brands now, and they do all the tea for Mason, which we're going to taste later. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. I mean, an incredible family. I think 5th generation now, possibly, isn't it?
Smith family.
The Smith family, I know. No, so these guys, if it's done properly, they can make a success of it. There's no doubt. Yes. I think the trouble with all these other tea companies, of course, have been taken over the years by large conglomerates, and of course they're run by accountants who only ever look at the bottom line, and they're all sort of, I don't know, racing to get to the bottom almost, isn't it? You get the feeling. And so it's lovely when we've got people like you who still have standards and like to stick to them.
As much as one can.
As much as one can, as you say, because it depends on the supply. Absolutely, Gordon. Well, look, Gordon, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. It really has.
Thank you for inviting me to do this. And I wish you every success with this tea museum.
Thank you, Gordon. All the best, boy. Take
care. If
care.
I can think of anything else, I'll be in touch again.
Thank you, Gordon.